Hello, and welcome to ZzScience. Wherever and whenever you're listening from, I hope you're doing well. Just let your body relax and let your mind slow down. If you feel like it, you can tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And if there's a science topic you'd like to gently fall asleep to, I'd love to hear it. For now, let's slow things down and begin. There's something about looking up at the night sky that makes you feel small. Not in a bad way, just small. The stars stretch out in every direction, more of them than you could ever count. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a question forms. It's a simple question, really. So simple that it almost feels strange to ask it out loud. Where is everyone? That's it. That's the whole question. Where is everyone? If the universe is so vast, so full of stars and planets and possibility, then where are all the others? Where are the civilizations, the signals, the visitors, the signs of life beyond our own? We look up and we see emptiness. We listen and we hear silence. And somehow, that silence feels louder than any sound could be. The question isn't new. People have wondered about this for as long as we've understood what stars actually are. But it became something more specific, something that scientists could actually grapple with, when a physicist named Enrico Fermi asked it during a casual lunch conversation in the summer of 1950. He was at Los Alamos National Laboratory, and the topic of UFOs came up. Someone mentioned a recent cartoon about aliens stealing trash cans. The conversation wandered, as lunch conversations do, and then Fermi asked his question. Where is everybody? His colleagues understood immediately what he meant. They'd been thinking about the same thing. The universe is old. The universe is enormous. Earth isn't special in any obvious way. Our sun is just one star among hundreds of billions in this galaxy alone. If intelligent life could arise here, it should have arisen elsewhere too, probably many times over. And if even a tiny fraction of those civilizations developed space travel, the entire galaxy should be colonized by now, or at least showing obvious signs of activity. But we don't see anything. We don't hear anything. The silence is complete. This became known as the Fermi Paradox. Not really a paradox in the formal sense, more of a puzzle, a tension between what we expect to see and what we actually observe. The math suggests we shouldn't be alone. The evidence suggests we are. Something doesn't add up. When you really start thinking about the numbers involved, the paradox becomes even more striking. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, contains somewhere between 200 and 400 billion stars. That's a range because counting stars is harder than it sounds. Many are dim, many are hidden behind dust clouds. But even taking the lower estimate, 200 billion is a number that's difficult to truly comprehend. If you counted one star per second, it would take you over 6,000 years to count them all. And that's just our galaxy. There are billions of other galaxies scattered throughout the observable universe. Not every star can host life, of course. Some are too hot, burning through their fuel too quickly to give life time to develop. Others are too unstable, flaring unpredictably. But many stars are similar to our sun, small, stable, long-lived. We call them main sequence stars, and they make up a significant portion of the galaxy. Around these stars orbit planets. We know this now because we found them, thousands of them. Before the 1990s, we could only guess whether planets existed around other stars. Now we know they're common, extremely common. Nearly every star seems to have at least one planet, and many have several. Some of these planets are gas giants like Jupiter, massive and inhospitable. Others are too close to their stars, baked by heat, their atmospheres stripped away. Still others are frozen, far out in the cold reaches of their solar systems. But some, a percentage that seems to grow with every new discovery, fall into what we call the habitable zone. Not too hot, not too cold. The right distance from their star for liquid water to exist on the surface. And water, as far as we know, is essential for life. The numbers start to look promising. If even a small fraction of stars have planets, and even a small fraction of those planets are in the habitable zone, and even a small fraction of those develop life, and even a small fraction of those develop intelligent life, you still end up with thousands, maybe millions, of civilizations in our galaxy alone. It seems almost inevitable. The universe appears to be set up for life to emerge, and yet we see nothing. The galaxy is roughly 100,000 light-years across. That sounds impossibly large, and in human terms it is. But in cosmic terms, it's not that big. A civilization with technology only slightly more advanced than ours could cross that distance in a few million years, even traveling well below the speed of light. And the galaxy is billions of years old. There's been plenty of time, more than enough time. If intelligent life arose just once, somewhere else in the galaxy, millions of years before us, they should be everywhere by now. We should see their presence. We should detect their signals. We should find evidence of their engineering projects, their spacecraft, their colonies. But when we look, we find nothing. This brings us to something called the Drake equation. It's not really an equation in the sense that it gives you a specific answer. It's more like a framework, a way of organizing your thinking about the question. Frank Drake, an astronomer, proposed it in 1961 as a way to estimate the number of active, communicative civilizations in the Milky Way. The equation breaks the problem down into factors: the rate at which stars form, the fraction of those stars that have planets, the number of planets per star that could support life, the fraction of those planets where life actually develops, the fraction where intelligent life develops, the fraction that develop technology capable of communication, and finally, the length of time such civilizations remain detectable. Each of these factors is uncertain. Some we have reasonable guesses for. Others are complete unknowns. When Drake first proposed the equation, we didn't know if other stars had planets at all. Now we know they do. That uncertainty is gone. But other uncertainties remain. We have no idea how common it is for life to arise on a habitable planet. We don't know how often intelligent life emerges once simple life exists. We don't know how long technological civilizations last before they destroy themselves or fade away, or transcend into something we wouldn't recognize. Depending on which values you plug into the Drake equation, you can get wildly different answers. Some estimates suggest millions of civilizations should exist in our galaxy right now. Others suggest we might be alone, or nearly so, with perhaps only a handful of others scattered across billions of stars. The equation doesn't solve the paradox. It just helps us see the shape of our ignorance more clearly. One of the factors in the Drake equation that gets a lot of attention is the lifespan of a technological civilization. How long does a species remain capable of communicating across interstellar distances? For us, that capability has existed for roughly a century. We've had radio telescopes and the ability to send signals into space for about that long. But will we still have that capability in another century? Another 1,000 years? Another million? Civilizations might be fragile. They might rise and fall quickly, flickering into existence and then vanishing before they have a chance to spread across the stars. There are so many ways for things to go wrong. Climate change, nuclear war, asteroid impacts, pandemics, resource depletion, political collapse. Maybe the average lifespan of a technological civilization is only a few hundred years. If that's true, then even if such civilizations arise frequently, the chance of two existing at the same time, close enough to detect each other, becomes vanishingly small. We might be surrounded by ruins, by dead worlds that once hosted brilliant cultures, now silent. This is a sobering thought. It suggests that intelligence might be common but fleeting, that the universe might be full of ghosts, civilizations that burned bright and then faded away, leaving nothing behind but cold ruins and faint echoes that dissipate into the background radiation of space. We would be, in that case, simply the latest in a long line of civilizations that briefly achieved consciousness and then disappeared. Some scientists have proposed something called the Great Filter. It's an idea that tries to explain the silence. The Great Filter is some stage in the evolution of life that's incredibly difficult to pass. A bottleneck so narrow that very few, if any, make it through. The question is where this filter lies. Is it behind us or ahead of us? If the filter is behind us, then we've already passed the hardest part. Maybe the jump from simple chemistry to self-replicating molecules is incredibly rare. Maybe the development of complex cells is a near miracle. Maybe intelligence is a fluke, something that almost never happens even when life exists. If that's the case, we can breathe a sigh of relief. The hard part is over. We're through the bottleneck. The future is open. But if the filter is ahead of us, that's more concerning. It means that civilizations regularly reach our level of development, and then something stops them. Something prevents them from spreading across the stars. Maybe it's self-destruction. Maybe it's something we haven't thought of yet. Maybe there's some threshold that civilizations reach, some test they must pass, and most fail. If the filter is ahead of us, then our silence when we look at the stars might be because we're looking at our own future. A future where we, too, fall silent. There's no way to know which scenario is correct. Both seem plausible. Both fit the evidence, or rather, the lack of evidence. The Great Filter is less of an answer and more of a way to frame the problem. It turns the question from where is everyone into what stopped everyone, or maybe what will stop us. Then there's the possibility that Earth is genuinely unusual. Not in some mystical sense, but in the specific combination of factors that allowed life to arise and thrive here. This idea goes by several names, but it's often called the rare Earth hypothesis. According to this view, simple life might be common in the universe, but complex life requires such a precise set of conditions that it's extraordinarily rare. Consider everything that had to go right for us to be here. Earth sits in the habitable zone, yes, but it's also the right size. Too small, and it couldn't hold an atmosphere. Too large, and that atmosphere would be crushing. We have a large moon, unusually large for a planet our size, which stabilizes our axial tilt and gives us regular seasons. We're in the right part of the galaxy, far enough from the center to avoid intense radiation, but not so far out that we lack the heavier elements needed for complex chemistry. We have Jupiter, a giant planet whose gravity shields us from many asteroid impacts that would otherwise strike Earth. We have plate tectonics, which recycle carbon and regulate our climate over geological timescales. We have a magnetic field that protects us from solar wind. Any one of these factors might seem minor, but taken together, they create a very specific set of conditions. Change any one of them significantly, and Earth might be lifeless. Or it might have only simple life, bacteria and archaea, nothing more complex. The jump to complex, multicellular life took billions of years on Earth. It might be that most planets with life never make that jump. They stay at the microbial level indefinitely. If Earth is rare in this way, then the galaxy might be full of planets with bacteria, but very few with anything more complex. And even if complex life does arise, intelligence is another hurdle. Evolution doesn't have goals. Intelligence isn't inevitable. It's just one survival strategy among many, and it comes with costs. Large brains require enormous amounts of energy. They make childbirth difficult and dangerous. They create social complexity that can lead to conflict. For most of Earth's history, life got along fine without intelligence. It only emerged recently, and only in one lineage. Maybe intelligence is rare even when complex life exists. If you put all of this together, the rare Earth hypothesis suggests that we might be, if not unique, then at least very uncommon. There might be other intelligent civilizations out there, but they might be so far apart that communication is impossible. The galaxy might be vast enough that each of us is effectively alone, shouting into a darkness so deep that our voices never reach each other. This is a lonely thought, but there's something almost comforting about it too. It means we're not late. We're not looking at a galaxy that was colonized long ago by others. We're not a footnote in someone else's story. If we're rare, then what happens here matters. The future is genuinely open. What we do with our intelligence, our technology, our brief moment of consciousness in the cosmos might be unique, precious even. Another possibility is that civilizations exist but choose not to contact us. This is sometimes called the zoo hypothesis. The idea is that we're being observed but not interfered with, like animals in a zoo or specimens in a lab. Advanced civilizations might have made a collective decision to leave developing worlds alone, to let them evolve naturally without outside influence. We're being watched, but from a distance, and we won't be contacted until we reach some threshold of maturity or development. It's an idea that appeals to some people and strikes others as wishful thinking. Why would advanced civilizations care enough to watch us, but not care enough to make contact? What would they gain from observation? And how would such a policy be enforced across multiple civilizations over millions of years? It seems like it would only take one curious civilization, one rebel group, one explorer who decides to make contact, and the whole system would break down. Still, the hypothesis has a certain logic to it. If you were an advanced civilization that had seen many others rise and fall, you might develop ethical guidelines about interference. You might recognize that contact with a more advanced civilization can be destabilizing, even destructive, for the less advanced one. History provides plenty of examples from Earth. When technologically advanced cultures encountered less advanced ones, the results were often catastrophic for the latter. Disease, conquest, cultural erasure. Maybe advanced civilizations have learned this lesson and choose to wait, to watch, to let younger civilizations develop on their own terms. Or maybe they're not watching at all. Maybe they just don't care. The universe is vast. There might be civilizations out there so advanced that we're beneath their notice. We're like ants at a picnic, going about our business while something vastly more complex happens around us that we can't perceive or understand. They might not be hiding from us. They might just be doing things so far beyond our comprehension that we don't recognize their activity as intelligent. There's a darker version of this idea too. It's called the dark forest hypothesis, and it comes from a science fiction novel, but the logic is worth considering. The idea is that the universe is like a dark forest. Every civilization is a hunter moving quietly through the trees. You don't know who else is out there. You don't know their intentions. The only thing you know for certain is that resources are limited and competition is real. In such an environment, the safest strategy is silence. Don't broadcast your presence. Don't reveal your location. Because if you do, you become a target. According to this view, civilizations that survive are civilizations that stay quiet. The galaxy might be full of intelligent life, but everyone is hiding, listening, afraid to make the first move. Any civilization that's too noisy, that advertises its presence too loudly, gets noticed and eliminated by someone who sees them as a threat or a resource to be exploited. The silence we hear isn't absence, it's fear. This is a grim scenario. It turns the question of where is everyone into everyone is hiding and we should be too. It suggests that our radio signals, our attempts to broadcast messages into space, our dreams of contact, are all incredibly naive and potentially suicidal. We're shouting in the dark forest, and something might hear us. But there are problems with this idea too. It assumes that conflict is inevitable, that resources are so scarce that civilizations must compete violently. But the universe is enormous, and resources are abundant. A civilization capable of interstellar travel probably has access to more resources than they could use in 1,000,000 years. Asteroids, moons, ice, metals, energy from stars. The need for violent competition seems less pressing when you have access to an entire galaxy's worth of raw materials. Maybe advanced civilizations aren't interested in conquest at all. Maybe they've moved beyond such things. Then again, maybe not. We can only reason from our own experience, and human history is full of conflict over resources, territory, ideology. Maybe that's a universal pattern. Maybe it's something that all intelligent species struggle with. Or maybe we're projecting our own fears and assumptions onto a universe that works according to principles we don't yet understand. For decades now, we've been searching, actively searching, using radio telescopes to listen for signals from space. This effort is called SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. It began in earnest in the 1960s and continues today. The basic idea is simple. If there are other technological civilizations out there, they might be using radio waves to communicate, just as we do. Radio waves travel at the speed of light and can cross vast distances without being absorbed or scattered too much. If we listen carefully enough, we might pick up their transmissions. The challenge is knowing where to listen and what frequency to search. Radio covers a wide spectrum. You can't monitor every frequency at every point in the sky all the time. So researchers make educated guesses. They focus on frequencies that are relatively free from natural background noise. Point their telescopes at nearby sun-like stars. They look for signals that seem artificial, patterns that couldn't be produced by natural processes. A repeating sequence of prime numbers, for instance, or a signal that pulses in a regular way. So far, we've found nothing. A few false alarms over the years. The WOW signal in 1977, a strong narrowband radio signal detected by the Big Ear telescope in Ohio. It lasted 72 seconds and was never detected again despite repeated attempts. It remains unexplained, but most researchers don't think it was aliens. Probably something more mundane, a passing satellite, a reflection, something terrestrial that happened to mimic what an alien signal might look like. The silence continues. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, as the saying goes. We've only searched a tiny fraction of the sky, and only at certain frequencies, and only for a few decades. The galaxy is vast and old. Maybe we just haven't looked in the right place yet. Maybe civilizations don't use radio at all. Maybe they use something else. Some form of communication we haven't discovered or wouldn't recognize. Laser pulses, gravitational waves, neutrinos, something we can't even imagine yet. Or maybe they did use radio, but millions of years ago, and their signals have long since passed us by. We might be listening to the galaxy at the wrong time. Imagine you're sitting by a phone, waiting for it to ring. But the call was made 1,000,000 years ago, before you were born, before your species existed. The signal is still out there, traveling through space, but it's long gone from Earth. We missed it, and we'll never know it existed. Time is part of the problem. The universe is not only vast in space, but also in time. Civilizations might rise and fall across millions or billions of years, and the chance of two existing simultaneously close enough to communicate is small. We might be cosmically early or cosmically late. Either way, we're out of sync. Some researchers have started looking for other signs of advanced civilizations. Not radio signals, but physical traces, megastructures, engineering projects on a scale that would be visible across interstellar distances. The most famous of these hypothetical structures is called a Dyson sphere, named after physicist Freeman Dyson. The idea is that a sufficiently advanced civilization would want to capture as much of their star's energy as possible. One way to do this would be to build a shell or swarm of solar collectors around the star. This would block or dim the star's light, creating a distinctive signature we might be able to detect. We've looked for such signatures. We've found some unusual stars that dim in strange ways, but so far, every one has turned out to have a natural explanation. Dust clouds, comets, planetary rings, nothing that requires intelligent designers. Still, the search continues. If megastructures exist, we might eventually spot them. There's also the possibility that civilizations leave other traces. Chemical signatures in planetary atmospheres, industrial pollutants, artificial lights on the night side of planets, waste heat from massive energy consumption. These would all be detectable with the right instruments, though we'd need to be looking at nearby star systems. The signals would be faint and easily confused with natural phenomena. But as our telescopes improve, we get better at looking. And yet the silence persists. No signals, no structures, no obvious signs of engineering or intelligence. Just stars and planets and the background hum of natural processes. It's as if we're the only ones here, or at least the only ones making noise. This brings us back to consciousness itself. What does it mean to be aware in a universe that might be mostly empty of other awareness? We're made of atoms that formed in the hearts of ancient stars. The carbon in our bodies, the oxygen we breathe, the calcium in our bones, all of it was forged in stellar furnaces billions of years ago and scattered across space when those stars died. We're star stuff, as Carl Sagan famously said, the universe looking back at itself. But if we're alone, or nearly so, then that makes consciousness even stranger. It means the universe spent billions of years being unconscious of itself. Galaxies formed, stars ignited and died, planets coalesced and were destroyed, all without anyone to witness it. And then, in at least one place, matter organized itself in such a way that it became aware. It started asking questions. It started looking around and wondering. That seems impossibly unlikely. Not just the physical complexity of a brain, though that's remarkable enough, but the fact that matter can produce subjective experience at all. That there's something it's like to be us. That we don't just process information, but feel things, experience qualia, have an inner life. Science can describe the neural correlates of consciousness, the brain, activity associated with awareness, but it hasn't explained why that activity produces experience. Why there's something rather than nothing, subjectively speaking. Maybe consciousness is more common than we think. Maybe it's a fundamental property of certain kinds of information processing, something that emerges naturally when matter reaches a certain level of complexity. In that case, the universe might be full of inner experience, scattered across billions of worlds, each one unique and unrepeatable. We're not alone in being conscious. We're just alone in this particular form of consciousness, having these particular thoughts, seeing things from this particular perspective. Or maybe consciousness is incredibly rare. Maybe the specific conditions that produce it are so precise that it almost never happens. In that case, we might be precious beyond measure. Not because we're special in some cosmic plan, but because we're an accident so unlikely that it might never happen again. The universe might have one brief moment of self-awareness, here and now, through us, and then return to unconsciousness for the rest of eternity. Both possibilities are profound. Both change how we might think about our place in the cosmos and our responsibility to preserve and protect consciousness while it exists. If we're the only ones, or one of very few, then what we do matters enormously. Not to some external observer or judge, but to the universe itself. We're its only chance to understand itself, to create meaning, to produce art and science and love, and all the other things that consciousness makes possible. There's a weight to that, but there's also a kind of freedom. If there's no one out there to judge us, no elder civilizations to compare ourselves against, then we get to decide what consciousness becomes. We're writing the first chapter, or possibly the only chapter, of the universe's autobiography. That's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. When you think about the scales involved, human concerns start to seem small. Not unimportant, but small. We worry about our daily problems, our jobs and relationships and health, and those things matter because we're the ones living them. But zoom out far enough, and we're just patterns of matter and energy on a small planet orbiting an ordinary star in one galaxy among trillions. Everything we've ever done, every thought we've ever had, happens in an inconceivably tiny fraction of space and time. And yet, we're the part of the universe that knows this. We're the part that can zoom out and see the whole picture, or at least try to. A rock doesn't know it's small. A star doesn't ponder its place in the cosmos. But we do. That ability to reflect, to step outside ourselves and consider our own existence, that's remarkable, regardless of how common or rare it is. The Fermi Paradox doesn't have an answer yet. Maybe it never will. Maybe the answer is something we haven't thought of yet. Some explanation so obvious in hindsight that future generations will wonder why we ever found it puzzling. Or maybe there is no single answer. Maybe the universe is complex enough that different explanations apply in different cases. Some civilizations destroy themselves. Others choose silence. Still, others exist but use technology we can't detect. And some planets, like Earth, might be rare enough that intelligence simply doesn't arise very often. What we know for certain is limited. We know the universe is vast and old. We know it contains countless stars and planets. We know that life arose here and that it eventually produced consciousness. We know we've looked for others and haven't found them yet. Beyond that, we're speculating, making educated guesses based on incomplete information. That might be frustrating, but it's also part of the adventure. We're living in a time when these questions are just starting to become answerable. A few decades ago, we didn't know if planets existed around other stars. Now we've found thousands. A century ago, we didn't know that other galaxies existed. We thought the Milky Way was the entire universe. Now we know it's just one galaxy among billions. Each generation pushes the boundary of knowledge a little further. Maybe our generation will be the one that finds the first signs of life beyond Earth. Or maybe that discovery is still centuries away. Either way, the search itself is meaningful. There's something humbling about not knowing, about standing at the edge of the unknown and admitting that we don't have all the answers. Maybe we never will. The universe doesn't owe us explanations. It doesn't care what we think or what we believe. It simply is, unfolding according to its own laws, indifferent to our curiosity. But we care. We ask questions even when the answers might never come. We build telescopes and spacecraft and equations because we want to understand. That impulse to know, to explore, to reach beyond ourselves, that's part of what makes us human. Maybe it's what makes any conscious being what they are. The universe examining itself through billions of years of evolution, trying to understand its own nature. At night, when the sky is clear and dark, you can see thousands of stars with the naked eye. On a truly dark night, far from city lights, you can see the band of the Milky Way stretching across the sky like a river of light. Each point of light is a sun, possibly with its own planets, its own story. Most of those suns are older than ours. They've been burning for billions of years longer. If life arose around them, it had more time to develop, more time to evolve, more time to spread. And yet, when we look at those stars, we see no sign of anyone else. No city lights on distant planets, no massive engineering works, no radio signals carrying news or greetings or warnings, just stars, burning silently, and planets, orbiting unseen. The silence is total. Maybe that silence is temporary. Maybe we're just early, catching the universe at a moment before it fills with intelligence and communication. Maybe in 1,000,000 years, the galaxy will be buzzing with activity, civilizations talking to each other across the light years, and we'll be one of the elder species, looking back at this time when we felt alone. Or maybe the silence is permanent. Maybe we're seeing the universe as it really is, vast and beautiful and empty of mind except for rare, brief flickers of consciousness that appear and vanish without ever connecting. Maybe the story of the universe is mostly one of unconscious matter following physical laws, and consciousness is just a brief footnote, a strange anomaly that arises occasionally and then fades away. Both scenarios are possible. Both are consistent with what we observe. And both suggest that what we do now, in this moment, matters. If we're early, then we might be one of the first civilizations to spread beyond our home world. What we do will influence how the galaxy develops. If we're rare, then we might be one of the few chances the universe has to know itself. Either way, we have a responsibility to preserve what we have, to treat consciousness as the precious and fragile thing it is. It's easy to take existence for granted. We wake up every day and go about our lives, and most of the time, we don't think about how improbable it all is. But occasionally, something breaks through. You look up at the stars and feel that sense of scale, that vertigo of realizing how small you are and how vast everything else is. And in that moment, the Fermi Paradox becomes more than an abstract puzzle. It becomes personal. Where is everyone? And what does it mean that we can ask that question but can't answer it? The silence of the universe might be its most profound characteristic. Not the silence of mere absence, but the silence of something unknown. It's the difference between an empty room and a dark room. In an empty room, you know there's nothing there. In a dark room, you can't be sure. The darkness itself becomes a presence, heavy with possibility. That's what the silence of space feels like. Heavy with possibility. Every star might host life. Every planet might have a story. Or none of them might. We don't know. And so we keep looking. We send out our probes and our signals. We build better telescopes. We search for biosignatures in the atmospheres of distant planets. We listen for radio waves that might be artificial. We do this knowing that we might never find anything, but unable to stop ourselves from trying. The search is its own reward in a way. It's us refusing to accept ignorance, refusing to simply wonder passively. We're reaching out into the cosmos, hoping for an answer, prepared for silence. There are practical reasons to search for extraterrestrial life, of course. If we found it, even microbial life, it would answer fundamental questions about biology and chemistry. Are the building blocks of life universal? Does life arise wherever conditions are suitable? Or is Earth a special case? If we found intelligent life, we might learn from them, benefit from their knowledge, avoid their mistakes. We might not be alone in facing existential risks. We might find allies, partners, friends. But the search is also philosophical, spiritual even, though not in a religious sense. It's about our place in the universe, about whether we're connected to something larger or ultimately isolated, about whether consciousness is common or rare, meaningful or accidental. These aren't questions that telescopes can fully answer, but they inform why we build telescopes in the first place. The physicist Freeman Dyson once said that our minds are not entirely divorced from the universe. We're part of it, products of it. Our thoughts are physical processes, patterns of electrical activity in neurons that are made of atoms that came from stars. When we think about the universe is thinking about itself. That's not metaphor. That's literally true. We're the universe's way of knowing it exists. If we're alone in doing this, or nearly alone, that's both lonely and remarkable. It means consciousness might be the rarest thing in the universe. Rarer than diamonds or gold or any physical treasure. It means every person who has ever lived, every thought that's ever been thought, every feeling that's ever been felt, all of it is part of an enormously unlikely experiment in matter becoming aware of itself. That experiment might fail. Civilizations might not last. Consciousness might flicker out, here and elsewhere, and the universe might return to its default state of unconscious existence. But for now, in this moment, we're here. We're aware. We're asking questions. That has to count for something. The history of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence is full of optimism and disappointment. In the early days, in the 1960s and 70s, many scientists were confident that we'd find something quickly. The universe was so vast, life seemed so plausible, that it felt like only a matter of time. Frank Drake, who developed the equation that bears his name, thought we might detect signals within a few years. Carl Sagan was optimistic too. He spoke eloquently about the possibility of contact, about what we might learn from other civilizations, how they might help us grow and mature as a species. But the decades passed and we found nothing. The optimism faded, replaced by something more cautious. Maybe life was rarer than we thought. Maybe intelligence was rarer still. Maybe civilizations didn't last long enough to make contact feasible. Or maybe we were just looking in the wrong way, at the wrong frequencies, at the wrong times. The search continued, but the expectations changed. Today, there's a new wave of interest in the field, driven partly by the discovery of exoplanets. We know now that planets are common, and some of them are similar to Earth in size and temperature. That's encouraging. It means there are targets to study, places where life might exist. New telescopes are being built or planned that will be able to analyze the atmospheres of these distant worlds, looking for gases like oxygen or methane that might indicate biological activity. It's indirect, but it's a start. There's also more appreciation now for how difficult the search is. Space is unimaginably vast. Signals are faint. The chances of two civilizations existing at the same time, close enough to communicate, using compatible technology, and both interested in making contact, those chances might be very small. Finding extraterrestrial intelligence might be the hardest problem humanity has ever attempted. That doesn't mean we should stop trying. It just means we should be realistic about how long it might take and how uncertain success is. Some people find the Fermi Paradox depressing. The idea that we might be alone, or that other civilizations might have destroyed themselves, or that the universe might be full of life, but we'll never meet them. These thoughts can feel heavy. They force us to confront our own fragility and insignificance. But there's another way to look at it. The paradox reminds us that existence isn't guaranteed. Consciousness isn't permanent. What we have is temporary and valuable. That makes it more meaningful, not less. If we were just one civilization among millions, our choices might not matter much. If we failed, there would be others to carry on. But if we're rare, if we're possibly unique, then what we do has cosmic significance. We're not just deciding our own fate. We're deciding whether consciousness continues in this part of the universe, or whether it winks out. That's a responsibility, yes, but it's also a kind of empowerment. We matter. Our choices matter. Not because some external authority says so, but because we might be all there is. The question of intelligence and its rarity is tied up with the nature of intelligence itself. What is it exactly? We tend to define it in human terms: the ability to solve problems, to use language, to create tools, to think abstractly. But those are just the forms intelligence takes in us. Other species on Earth show intelligence in different ways. Octopuses solve complex puzzles, but have brains structured completely differently from ours. Crows use tools and plan for the future. Dolphins have sophisticated communication systems. Plants respond to their environment in complex ways we're only beginning to understand. Even slime molds can solve maze problems and optimize networks. Intelligence might not be one thing, but many things. Different solutions to the problem of survival, different ways of processing information and responding to the world. When we look for extraterrestrial intelligence, we're looking for something like ourselves. Technological civilizations that build radio transmitters and spacecraft. But the universe might be full of other kinds of intelligence that we wouldn't recognize or couldn't communicate with. Beings whose minds work so differently from ours that we'd have nothing to say to each other even if we met. This raises uncomfortable questions about what we're really searching for. Are we looking for life, or are we looking for ourselves? For validation that our particular path, our particular way of being conscious and technological, is universal. Maybe intelligence in the universe takes countless forms, and technological civilization is just one rare variant. Maybe most intelligence never bothers with technology. Maybe it finds other ways to exist, other goals to pursue. On Earth, technology arose in one species out of millions. Most animals get along fine without it. They're adapted to their environments, successful by evolutionary standards, but they don't build radios or rockets. They don't ask questions about the universe. They just live. Maybe that's the norm. Maybe technological intelligence is a strange aberration, useful in certain circumstances, but not inevitable and not necessarily superior. We think of ourselves as the pinnacle of evolution, but evolution doesn't have pinnacles, it has survivors. We've survived so far by being clever and adaptable, by using tools and language and cooperation. But we've only been around for a few 100,000 years. Sharks have been around for 400 million years. From an evolutionary perspective, they're far more successful than we are. They found a good design and stuck with it. We're still experimenting, still changing, still trying to figure out what works. And we're fragile. Our civilization depends on countless interconnected systems that could fail in numerous ways. We're dependent on agriculture, which depends on climate stability. We're dependent on fossil fuels, which are finite and warming the planet. We're dependent on global trade networks that could collapse if the right catastrophe struck. We've built something impressive but precarious. A house of cards on a shaky table. Maybe that's why other civilizations are silent. Maybe they all reach this stage, this moment of fragility, where their technology gives them enormous power, but also creates enormous risks. And most of them don't make it through. They either destroy themselves outright, through war or environmental collapse, or they decline gradually, losing complexity until they're back to simpler ways of living. Technological civilization might be like a firework, bright and impressive while it lasts, but brief. Most of them burn out before they have a chance to spread. If that's true, then the silence we hear is the silence of failure. Not our failure, not yet, but the failure of countless others who came before us and didn't survive their own success. We're hearing the echo of dead worlds, civilizations that briefly achieved what we've achieved and then fell back into darkness. That should scare us. It should make us careful. But it should also motivate us. If the best filter is ahead, if most civilizations fail at this stage, then our job is to be the exception. To be the ones who figure it out, who survive our own technology, who make it through the bottleneck into whatever comes next. That's not easy. It might not even be possible, but it's worth trying. There are people who think we should be actively trying to contact extraterrestrial intelligence. They want to send powerful, directed messages toward nearby stars, announcing our presence and inviting a response. This is called METI, Messaging Extraterrestrial Intelligence, as opposed to SETI, which just listens. The idea is that if everyone stays quiet, no one will ever make contact. Someone has to take the first step. Someone has to reach out. Others think this is incredibly dangerous. They argue that we don't know who or what is out there. Broadcasting our location might attract unwanted attention. It's the dark forest hypothesis again. Stay quiet, stay hidden. Don't take unnecessary risks. We can listen without transmitting. We can search without exposing ourselves. That's the safer strategy. Both sides have valid points. The universe might be benign, full of curious civilizations waiting for someone to say hello. Or it might be hostile, full of predators waiting for prey to reveal themselves. We don't know which, and we can't know until we try. But trying might be irreversible. Once the message is sent, we can't take it back. It travels outward at the speed of light, reaching star after star, and anyone listening will know we're here. humanity has already sent some deliberate messages. The Arecibo message in 1974, a radio signal aimed at a globular cluster 25,000 light-years away. The Voyager Golden Records, physical artifacts attached to the Voyager spacecraft carrying sounds and images from Earth. These messages are symbolic more than practical. The Arecibo message won't reach its target for thousands of years, and there's no guarantee anyone will be listening when it arrives. The Voyager spacecraft will drift through space for millions of years, probably, never encountering anyone. But we've also been unintentionally broadcasting for over a century. Every radio and television signal we've ever sent has leaked into space. They're weak by the time they get far from Earth, and they fade into the background noise of the universe fairly quickly. But they're there. Anyone nearby with sensitive enough equipment could detect them, could already have detected them. If there's a civilization within 100 light-years, they might know we're here. They might have been listening to our news broadcasts and entertainment, learning about us without us knowing they exist. That's a strange thought. We might be under observation right now. Not by anything malicious necessarily, maybe just by curious scientists on another world, pointing their telescopes in our direction, watching as we stumble through the early stages of technological civilization. Or maybe not. Maybe no one is watching. Maybe no one is close enough, or interested enough, or still around. We're performing for an empty theater. The silence stretches out in every direction. We've been listening for decades and heard nothing. We've looked at thousands of star systems and found no sign of megastructures or artificial constructs. We've analyzed the light from exoplanets and found nothing that can't be explained by natural processes. Either they're not there, or they're very good at hiding, or we're not looking in the right way. Some scientists have suggested that we might be living in a simulation, that what we think of as the universe is actually a computer program running in some other reality. This idea sounds like science fiction, but it's taken seriously by some physicists and philosophers. If it's possible to create simulated universes, and if civilizations advanced enough to do so would create many such simulations, then statistically, we're more likely to be living in a simulation than in the base reality. Most conscious beings would be simulated rather than real. If we are in a simulation, that might explain the Fermi Paradox. The simulators might have only created one civilization, ours, because that's all they were interested in studying. The universe looks empty because it is empty. It's a stage set, vast and detailed, but with only one species of actors. The stars are real, or real within the simulation, but there's nothing living around them. We're alone because we're the only ones who are programmed to exist. This is unfalsifiable, of course. There's no way to test whether we're in a simulation or not. Any evidence we might look for could be part of the simulation. It's an idea that explains everything, and therefore explains nothing. But it does offer one possible solution to the paradox. We're alone because loneliness is part of the experiment. The simulators wanted to see what a single, isolated civilization would do, how we'd react to the apparent emptiness of the universe, whether we'd give up or keep searching, whether we'd destroy ourselves or find a way to survive. Most scientists don't take the simulation hypothesis seriously as an explanation for the Fermi paradox. It's too speculative, too detached from testable predictions. But it illustrates how strange the situation is, how far outside our normal experience. The universe doesn't behave the way we expected. It doesn't contain what we thought it would. And so we're left grasping for explanations, even unlikely ones, because the straightforward explanations don't seem to fit. The straightforward explanations are that either life is incredibly rare, or intelligence is incredibly rare, or technological civilizations don't last long, or we're looking in the wrong way, or some combination of these factors. None of these explanations require exotic physics or philosophy. They're all consistent with what we know about biology, chemistry, physics, and astronomy. But they're unsatisfying in their own way, because they leave us alone, or nearly so, in a vast cosmos that seems like it should be teeming with life. Maybe unsatisfied is how we're supposed to feel. Maybe the universe isn't designed to make sense to us. It exists according to its own rules, and we're trying to understand it with brains that evolved to navigate life on the African savanna, not to comprehend cosmic scales and quantum mechanics. We do remarkably well considering our limitations. We figured out an enormous amount about how the universe works. But there might be things we simply can't grasp, concepts that are beyond the capacity of human cognition, no matter how smart we get. That's humbling. It's also freeing in a way. If there are limits to what we can know, then we don't have to feel bad about not knowing everything. We can do our best, push as far as we can, and accept that some questions might not have answers we can understand. The Fermi Paradox might be one of those questions, or it might not. We won't know until we know. What we do know is that we're here, conscious and curious, asking questions about our place in the cosmos. That's real. That's undeniable. Whatever else might be true, that's a fact we can hold on to. We exist, we think, we wonder. And we're alone in the only way that really matters, which is that we're stuck inside our own heads, inside our own experience, unable to truly know what it's like to be anyone or anything else. Even if we found aliens tomorrow, even if we made contact and established communication, we'd still be fundamentally alone. We couldn't step outside ourselves, couldn't experience the universe from their perspective. We could share information, exchange ideas, maybe even develop friendship or some equivalent. But we'd still be separate beings, separated by the gap between one consciousness and another. That gap might be larger between species than it is between humans, but it exists even between humans. We're all islands of awareness in the ocean of existence. The Fermi Paradox asks where everyone is, but maybe the deeper question is whether everyone even makes sense as a concept. Maybe consciousness is so particular, so individual, that each instance of it is alone by definition. We're looking for others like us, but there might not be others like us. There might only be others unlike us, so different that we wouldn't recognize each other even if we met. Or maybe we're overthinking it. Maybe the answer is simple and we just haven't found it yet. Maybe civilizations are common but short-lived. Maybe they're rare but long-lived, and we're just early. Maybe they're common and long-lived but quiet, and we'll find them when we develop better technology. Maybe life exists, but intelligence is rare. Maybe intelligence exists, but technology is rare. Maybe. Every possibility is still open. Every answer is still possible. That's the frustrating and exciting thing about being alive at this moment in history. We're on the edge of knowing so much more than we did before. Every new exoplanet discovery, every improvement in telescope technology, every new theory about the origin of life or the nature of consciousness, all of it brings us closer to understanding our place in the universe. But we're not there yet. We're in the middle of the journey, past the beginning, but far from the end. We can see how much we've learned and how much we still don't know. Our ancestors looked up at the sky and saw gods and spirits. They created mythology to explain what they observed. The movements of the sun and moon and planets became stories about divine beings. The stars were holes in the fabric of heaven, or the souls of the dead, or the campfires of gods. These explanations were wrong, but they satisfied a need. The need to make sense of things, to fit observation into a narrative framework that gave meaning to existence. We do the same thing now, just with different tools. We create scientific theories instead of myths. We use math and observation instead of storytelling. But the impulse is the same. We're pattern-seeking creatures. We need things to make sense. When they don't, we feel uncomfortable. The Fermi Paradox makes us uncomfortable because it doesn't fit our expectations. The universe should be full of life, and it's not, or at least we can't see it. That creates cognitive dissonance. Something is wrong with our understanding. Either we're misunderstanding the universe, or we're misunderstanding ourselves. Probably both. Our models are always incomplete. Science is a process of successive approximation. We build theories that fit the available evidence, and then new evidence comes in, and we revise the theories. Sometimes the revisions are small. Sometimes they're revolutionary. We thought the Earth was the center of the universe until we realized it wasn't. We thought the Milky Way was the entire universe until we realized it wasn't. We thought planets were rare until we realized they weren't. Each time we were wrong, and each time we learned something fundamental about reality. We might be wrong about the Fermi Paradox too. Our current understanding might be missing something crucial. Maybe there's a form of life we haven't considered. Maybe there's a method of communication we haven't discovered. Maybe consciousness works differently than we think. Maybe intelligence isn't the kind of thing that builds civilizations and radios. Maybe it does other things, pursues other goals, exists in other ways. Or maybe we're right and we really are alone. Maybe life is so improbable that it happened only once. Maybe we're the universe's single experiment with consciousness, and when we're gone, that's it. No more minds, no more questions, no more awareness, just atoms following physical laws, forever, in a cosmos that doesn't know it exists. Both possibilities are almost too large to hold in your head. Being alone in the universe is staggering. Being one among many is equally staggering. Either way, we're part of something vast and ancient and complex beyond full comprehension. Our lives are brief flickers in deep time. Our planet is a dust mote in the cosmic ocean. And yet, here we are, aware of all this, thinking about it, trying to understand it. The stars don't care that we exist. They burn and die according to the laws of physics, indifferent to our presence. The universe doesn't have opinions or feelings, it simply is. But we care. We give a damn about whether we're alone or not. We want to know. We need to know. That wanting, that curiosity, that's distinctly biological. Non-living things don't wonder about their place in the cosmos, but we do. And in that wondering, we give the universe something it otherwise wouldn't have. A perspective, a point of view, meaning, even if that meaning is something we create rather than something we discover. Philosophy asks whether meaning is real or constructed, whether values exist objectively or only in the minds of conscious beings. Science can't answer these questions. They're outside the domain of empirical investigation. But they matter to how we live and what we do with our brief time as conscious beings. If we're alone, and if meaning is something we create, then we have enormous freedom and enormous responsibility. We get to decide what matters, what's worth preserving, what's worth pursuing. There's no cosmic rulebook to follow, no advanced civilization to guide us, no external authority to tell us we're doing it right or wrong. That can feel liberating or terrifying, depending on your temperament. Some people want guidance. They want to know there's a right way to live, a correct path to follow. Others prefer the freedom to choose their own way. But either way, the Fermi Paradox forces us to confront the possibility that we're on our own, that whatever happens to humanity is up to humanity. No one is coming to save us, or judge us, or even notice us. We're responsible for ourselves. This connects to existential risk in an interesting way. If we're rare or unique, then our extinction wouldn't just be the end of one species, it would be the end of something precious and possibly irreplaceable. All the art and music and literature humans have created, all the scientific knowledge we've accumulated, all the individual consciousness and experience that makes up human civilization. If we go extinct, that's all gone. Maybe forever. Maybe the universe never produces consciousness again, or not in this region of space, or not for billions of years. That makes our survival not just personally important, but cosmically important. We're not just trying to save ourselves out of self-interest. We're trying to preserve something rare and valuable. The only known instance of matter that has organized itself into minds that can reflect on their own existence and the nature of the universe. If that's worth anything, if consciousness has value, then we have a duty to protect it. Not because someone is watching or because there will be consequences if we fail, but because we're the only ones who can. This isn't to say that humans are the most important thing in the universe. We're not. We're just one species on one planet doing our best to survive and understand our situation. But we might be the only ones doing this particular thing in this particular part of space and time. That gives us a unique position, a unique opportunity, a unique responsibility. How we handle that responsibility will determine whether consciousness continues in this region of the universe or whether it flickers out, whether the experiment continues or ends, whether the universe goes on knowing itself through human eyes and human minds or returns to unconsciousness. That's not a small stakes game, that's everything. And yet most people don't think about it this way most of the time. They think about their immediate concerns, what to have for dinner, how to pay the bills, whether their relationships are working. These things matter too. They're what fill up daily life. But occasionally, it's worth stepping back and considering the bigger picture, the cosmic context, the vast scales of space and time, and the brief moment we occupy within them. You don't have to think about this stuff all the time. That would be exhausting. But thinking about it occasionally can shift your perspective, make you more aware of how strange and improbable it is that you exist at all, that you're conscious, that you're able to think these thoughts and ask these questions. Most of the universe is rocks and gas and empty space. You're the part that knows itself. That's remarkable, regardless of whether there are others doing the same thing elsewhere. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence continues. New projects are being funded, new telescopes are being built, new methods are being developed. We're not giving up. Even if the silence persists for decades or centuries more, we'll keep looking. Because the question is too important not to ask. Because the answer, whatever it is, will tell us something fundamental about the nature of reality and our place within it. If we find life, even simple microbial life, it changes everything. It means life isn't unique to Earth. It means the building blocks of biology are universal, or at least common. It means we're not alone, not truly. Life arose elsewhere. It might have arisen many times. We're part of a larger pattern, a cosmic phenomenon, rather than a one-time accident. If we find intelligent life, complex life, capable of thought and communication, that changes everything even more. It means intelligence is possible elsewhere. It means other minds exist out there, other perspectives, other ways of experiencing the universe. We could learn from them, share with them, maybe even cooperate or collaborate. The future would be wider and stranger and more interesting than anything we can imagine on our own. But if we search for centuries and find nothing, that tells us something too. It tells us that we're rare, at least, that whatever led to our existence was unlikely, that we shouldn't take consciousness for granted because it might not happen often. It tells us that the future is in our hands, because there's no one else close enough to affect it. It tells us that Earth might be the most important place in the observable universe simply because it's the only place where complex life exists, as far as we know. None of these answers are comforting exactly. They're just true, or will be true once we know which one is correct. The universe doesn't care about our comfort. It doesn't adjust itself to match our expectations or desires. It is what it is. Our job is to figure out what that is and how to live with that knowledge. The wonder is that we can do this at all, that we have the capacity to ask these questions and the tools to begin answering them. A few hundred years ago, we had no way to even approach the Fermi Paradox. We didn't know how far away the stars were. We didn't know that other galaxies existed. We didn't understand evolution or the age of the Earth or the basic chemistry of life. We've learned so much in such a short time, and we'll learn more. The curve of knowledge bends upward. Each generation knows more than the last. Each generation pushes the boundary of understanding a little further out. Maybe our generation will be the one that finally answers the question. Maybe it will be the next generation, or the one after that. Maybe it will take centuries, but eventually, if we survive long enough, we'll know. We'll understand why the universe is silent. We'll understand our place in the cosmic story. We'll have moved from wondering to knowing. And that transition, whenever it happens, will be one of the most important moments in human history. Until then, we live with uncertainty. We look up at the stars and we wonder. We build our telescopes and we listen. We send out our probes and our signals. We study exoplanets and search for biosignatures. We do all of this knowing that the answer might be disappointing. We might be alone. Or we might find something so different from ourselves that we can't communicate with it. Or we might find ruins of civilizations long dead. None of these outcomes is the happy ending we want, but they're all possible, and any answer is better than not knowing. The silence continues. The stars burn in their distant places. The planets orbit, some of them perhaps hosting life we haven't detected yet. And we're here, conscious and curious, asking our questions into the void. Maybe someone will answer. Maybe no one will. But we ask anyway, because that's what conscious beings do. They ask questions. They seek understanding. They refuse to accept ignorance when knowledge might be possible. And in that asking, in that refusal to give up even when the evidence is discouraging, there's something noble, something worth preserving. We're not just trying to survive as a species. We're trying to keep alive the capacity for curiosity, for wonder, for the kind of thinking that looks at the stars and asks what they mean. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us valuable, if anything is valuable. Not our technology or our accomplishments, though those matter, but our ability to care about things larger than ourselves, to pursue knowledge for its own sake, to wonder. The universe is vast and we are small. That's been true since the beginning and will be true until the end. But small doesn't mean insignificant. A single consciousness, a single mind able to reflect on existence and ask questions about it. That's infinitely more remarkable than all the dead matter in the universe. Stars are impressive, but they're just fusion reactions. Galaxies are beautiful, but they're just gravity and momentum playing out over billions of years. Consciousness is something else entirely. It's the universe waking up, looking around, trying to understand itself. If we're the only place that's happened, or one of very few places, then we're not insignificant at all. We're central, not in a geographical sense. Earth isn't in the middle of anything, but in a functional sense. We're the part of the universe that knows it exists. That makes us important, regardless of our size, or our location, or our power. We matter because we're aware, because we think and feel and wonder, because we're conscious. The Fermi Paradox asks where everyone is. But maybe the answer doesn't matter as much as we think. Maybe what matters is that we're here, asking the question. That we've achieved consciousness and understanding and the ability to look beyond ourselves. Whether we're alone or surrounded by others, that's still remarkable. That's still worth preserving and protecting and celebrating. So we keep looking, we keep listening, we keep searching. Not because we're guaranteed to find anything, but because the search itself is meaningful. Because refusing to give up, refusing to accept ignorance, refusing to stop asking questions, that's what conscious beings do. That's our nature, our purpose if we have one. The stars shine on, indifferent to our presence or absence. The universe continues its expansion. Time flows forward. And somewhere, on a small planet orbiting an ordinary star, conscious beings look up at the night sky and wonder. They ask questions that might never be answered. They search for others who might not exist. They hope for contact that might never come. But they keep hoping, keep searching, keep asking, because that's all they can do. And in that persistent curiosity, that refusal to accept the silence without trying to understand it, there's something beautiful, something worth preserving for as long as consciousness exists. The darkness stretches out in every direction. The silence is complete, and still we listen, still we wonder, still we hope that someday, somehow, someone will answer. And if they don't, if the silence continues forever, then we'll know we were alone. And we'll carry that knowledge forward. We'll be the ones who asked the question and lived with the answer. We'll be the part of the universe that knew itself, briefly, before returning to unconsciousness. And that will have to be enough. Because it's all we have, this moment, this awareness, this brief flicker of consciousness in the vast darkness of space and time. We can spend it searching for others or accepting our solitude. Either way, we're here now, aware now, thinking and feeling and wondering now. And now is all that exists. The past is gone, the future hasn't arrived. There's only this present moment, this continuous stream of experience, this ongoing process of being conscious and aware. The Fermi Paradox is a question about the universe, but it's also a question about ourselves, about what we are and what we mean, and whether our existence matters. The universe won't tell us these things. We have to figure them out for ourselves. We have to decide. What matters and why? We have to create meaning in a cosmos that doesn't come with meaning included. That's hard. It requires thought and effort and courage. It would be easier if someone else had already figured it out. If we could find an elder civilization that had answers to our questions. Guidance for how to survive and thrive and avoid the mistakes they made. But they're not there, or at least we haven't found them. So we're on our own, making our own path, figuring things out as we go. Maybe that's better. Maybe having to figure things out for ourselves makes us stronger, more resilient, more creative. Maybe the struggle is part of what makes consciousness valuable. Not just existing, but striving. Not just being aware, but trying to understand. Not just surviving, but reaching beyond survival towards something larger. The stars don't strive, they just exist, following the laws of physics from formation to death. No choice, no agency, no awareness of their own existence. We're different. We have choice, at least in some limited sense. We can decide what to do with our lives, individually and collectively. We can choose to search for extraterrestrial intelligence or to focus on other problems. We can choose to preserve our civilization or let it collapse. We can choose to be curious or complacent, kind or cruel, thoughtful or thoughtless. These choices matter. They determine what kind of species we are and what kind of future we create. They determine whether consciousness continues and in what form. No one is going to make these choices for us. No cosmic parent is going to step in and tell us we're doing it wrong. We're adults in a vast universe, responsible for ourselves, free to succeed or fail based on our own decisions. The Fermi Paradox reminds us of this. It reminds us that we're on our own, or at least we appear to be. That whatever happens next is up to us. That's terrifying and exhilarating. Terrifying because we might fail. We might make the wrong choices. We might be one more civilization that didn't make it through the filter. Exhilarating because the future is genuinely open, undetermined, ours to shape. In the silence of space, in the absence of others, we find ourselves. Not who we thought we were, or who we hoped to be, but who we actually are. Conscious beings on a small planet, trying to understand our place in the cosmos, trying to survive and thrive despite the challenges we face. That's enough. That has to be enough. Because it's real. It's what we have. It's who we are. The night sky is full of stars, each one a sun, possibly with planets, possibly with life. But we don't know. We can only wonder. And in that wondering, in that space between question and answer, we find ourselves. Conscious, curious, alive, asking questions that might never be answered, but unable to stop asking them anyway. The universe is vast, and we are small. But we're the part that knows, the part that cares, the part that wonders, and that makes us significant in a way that size can't measure. Consciousness is rare, or seems to be. Intelligence is precious, or might be. We're carrying something valuable through the cosmos, a flame of awareness in an ocean of darkness. And our job, if we have one, is to keep that flame alive, to protect it, to nurture it, to pass it forward to whatever comes next. Whether anyone else is doing the same thing elsewhere, we don't know. Maybe they are. Maybe the universe is full of conscious beings, each one isolated in their own pocket of space, each one wondering if they're alone. Maybe we'll find them someday. Maybe we'll make contact and discover we're part of something larger. A cosmic community of minds, each different, but all sharing the common experience of being aware in an otherwise unconscious universe. Or maybe we're alone. Maybe we're all there is. Maybe consciousness arose only here, only now, only in us. Maybe we're the universe's single chance to know itself, its only moment of self-awareness, before returning to the unconscious existence of mere matter and energy. Both possibilities are profound. Both give our lives and our choices cosmic significance. Both suggest that what we do matters enormously, not just to us, but to the universe itself. We're not just living our lives, we're determining whether consciousness continues, whether awareness persists, whether the universe goes on knowing itself or returns to unknowing. That's a heavy responsibility, but it's also a gift. We get to be the ones asking these questions, thinking these thoughts, wondering about our place in the vast scheme of things. Most of the universe can't do this. Most of it is just stuff, following physical laws, unconscious and unaware. We're the exception, the anomaly, the part that woke up and looked around and asked why. And in that asking, in that wondering, we give the universe something it otherwise wouldn't have. Purpose, maybe, or at least direction. We're matter that has organized itself into patterns complex enough to reflect on their own existence. We're the universe contemplating itself, studying itself, trying to understand itself. That's not nothing. That's remarkable. That's precious. The silence continues. The stars shine on. And we keep searching, keep wondering, keep hoping that someday we'll find an answer. That the silence will break. That someone will respond. That we'll discover we're not alone after all. Until then, we have each other. We have our planet, our home, this beautiful blue marble floating in the darkness. We have our consciousness, our ability to think and feel and wonder. We have our questions and our curiosity, and our refusal to accept ignorance when knowledge might be possible. That's enough to work with. That's enough to build a future on. Whether we're alone or surrounded by others, whether we're rare or common, whether we're the first or the last, we're here now, conscious now, alive now. And that now is all that really exists. The present moment, continuous and ongoing, the only time that's real. So we live in it, we experience it, we try to understand it. We ask our questions and we listen for answers. We search the sky and we wonder what's out there. We build our civilizations and we hope they'll last. We create meaning in a universe that doesn't come with meaning built in. We decide what matters and we try to protect it. The universe watches through our eyes. It knows itself through our minds. It experiences itself through our consciousness. And whether that's happening elsewhere or only here, it's happening. That's undeniable. That's real. That's what we are. Conscious beings in a vast universe, asking questions about our place in it, wondering if we're alone, searching for others who might be doing the same thing. The search continues. The silence persists. And still we wonder, still we hope. Still we look up at the stars and ask where everyone is. Maybe someday we'll know. Maybe someday the silence will break and we'll have our answer. Or maybe we'll search forever and never find anything. Maybe the silence is all there is. Maybe we're shouting into an empty universe and no one is there to hear us. But we shout anyway. We ask anyway. We search anyway. Because that's what conscious beings do. They wonder. They question. They reach beyond themselves towards something larger. They refuse to accept the darkness without trying to illuminate it. And in that refusal, in that persistent curiosity, in that determination to keep asking, even when no answers come, there's something beautiful, something human, something worth preserving for as long as consciousness exists anywhere in the cosmos. The stars shine on. The universe expands. Time flows forward. And somewhere in all that vastness, on one small planet, conscious beings wonder about their place in it all. They ask questions that might never be answered. They search for others who might not exist. They hope for a future that might never come. But they keep hoping, keep searching, keep wondering. Because hope and curiosity and wonder are what make them human, what make them conscious, what make them the part of the universe that knows itself. And that knowing, that awareness, that brief moment of consciousness in the vast darkness of space and time, that's everything. That's all there is. That's what we are and what we have to work with. The question remains open. Where is everyone? Why is the universe silent? We've explored many possible answers. Each one changes how we think about ourselves and our future. Each one suggests different strategies for survival, different priorities, different ways of understanding our significance or lack thereof. If civilizations are common but short-lived, then longevity becomes our primary goal. We need to solve the problems that destroy young civilizations. Climate change, nuclear weapons, resource depletion, political instability. These aren't just threats to our comfort or prosperity. They're existential risks that could end consciousness in this part of the universe. Making it through this vulnerable period becomes the most important thing we can do. If civilizations are rare but potentially long-lived, then our responsibility shifts slightly. We're precious not because we're fragile, but because we're unusual. The universe doesn't produce consciousness often. When it does, that consciousness should be protected and nurtured. We should spread beyond Earth, establish ourselves on multiple worlds, ensure that no single catastrophe can wipe us out completely. We should preserve knowledge and culture and the capacity for further development. If we're truly alone, then everything changes. We're not just one civilization among many. We're it, the only ones. The universe's single experiment with self-awareness. That makes our survival not just important, but cosmically crucial. If we fail, consciousness fails. If we succeed, consciousness continues. The weight of that responsibility is enormous, but so is the opportunity. We get to decide what consciousness becomes in this universe. These scenarios blend together in reality. We don't know which one is correct, so we have to prepare for all of them. We have to address short-term existential risks, while also planning for long-term survival and expansion. We have to take care of Earth, while also looking beyond it. We have to solve today's problems, while building capacity for tomorrow's challenges. That's difficult. It requires thinking on multiple timescales simultaneously. Most people naturally focus on immediate concerns. What's happening today, this week, this year? That's where the urgency is. That's where the visible problems are. But some of our biggest challenges require thinking across decades or centuries. Climate change unfolds over generations. Space colonization will take centuries. The survival of consciousness might depend on decisions we make now that won't pay off for thousands of years. Balancing these different timescales is one of the hardest things about being a technological civilization. We have to eat today and plant seeds for tomorrow and tend forests that won't mature for 100 years. All at the same time, all with limited resources and limited attention and limited agreement about what matters most. And we have to do all of this without guidance, without a manual, without knowing if we're on the right track. The Fermi Paradox suggests that if there are right answers, no one is around to share them with us. We're figuring this out as we go, making our best guesses, learning from our mistakes, hoping we don't make any mistakes large enough to be fatal. That's the human condition writ large. We've always been like this, fumbling forward, trying things, seeing what works. The difference now is that the stakes are higher. Our ancestors could make mistakes and recover. Their technologies weren't powerful enough to threaten the entire species, but we've reached a point where our capabilities outpace our wisdom. We can split atoms and alter genomes and change the climate, but we're not always sure we should. We have godlike powers, but mortal understanding. This mismatch between power and wisdom might be what the Great Filter is really about. Not any specific technology or threat, but the general problem of gaining capabilities faster than the wisdom to use them responsibly. Every civilization might face this challenge. Every species that develops technology might reach a point where they can destroy themselves. And whether they survive depends on whether they develop the wisdom to restrain their power quickly enough. We're in that dangerous zone right now. We have nuclear weapons that could devastate the planet. We have technologies that are changing the climate in ways that could make Earth much less hospitable. We have artificial intelligence that might eventually exceed human intelligence, with consequences can't fully predict. We have genetic engineering that could alter the human species itself. All of these are tools that could be used wisely or foolishly, for good or ill, to build or destroy. Whether we make it through depends on choices we make collectively as a species. Individual choices matter too, of course. What you do with your life, how you treat others, what you create or destroy, all of that has ripples. But some choices can only be made collectively. Whether to ban certain weapons, whether to regulate dangerous technologies, whether to cooperate on global challenges. These require coordination across nations and cultures and competing interests. They require wisdom and foresight and the ability to think beyond tribal loyalties. That's hard, maybe impossible. Human nature evolved in small groups where tribal thinking made sense. Us versus them. Compete for resources. Distrust outsiders. These instincts served us well for hundreds of thousands of years. But now we're living in a globalized world where everyone's fate is interconnected. Where problems in one region affect everyone. Where cooperation is essential, but our instincts make it difficult. Maybe this is where most civilizations fail. Not because they lack technology, but because they lack the social and psychological tools to use that technology wisely. They develop the power to destroy themselves before they develop the wisdom to refrain from doing so. They reach for the stars, but stumble on their own internal conflicts and contradictions. The enemy isn't out there in space. It's internal. It's us. That's a depressing thought, but it might be realistic. Looking at human history, we've spent most of it fighting each other. Wars and conflicts and competitions for dominance. We've also cooperated, built things together, created art and science and culture. But the fighting has always been there too. The question is whether we can transcend that pattern. Whether we can grow beyond our evolutionary programming and become something wiser, more cooperative, more capable of long-term thinking. Some people are optimistic about this. They point to moral progress over time, the decline of slavery and the expansion of rights, the development of international institutions and laws, the growing recognition that we're all in this together. These are real changes. They suggest we can learn and grow and become better versions of ourselves. Others are pessimistic. They point to ongoing conflicts and inequalities, the persistence of war and oppression, the difficulty of getting people to agree on anything, the tendency for progress to be followed by backsliding. They see human nature as fixed, our problems as permanent, our chances of long-term survival as low. The truth is probably somewhere in between. We can change, but slowly. We can learn, but imperfectly. We can cooperate, but not always. Whether that's enough to ensure our survival is an open question. One we won't know the answer to until we've either survived or failed. The universe doesn't care which way it goes. It will continue either way. Stars will keep burning. Galaxies will keep rotating. The laws of physics will keep operating. Whether consciousness exists somewhere within all that vastness or not makes no difference to the universe itself. The difference is only to us, only to the conscious beings who exist and who would prefer to continue existing. That preference for existence, for survival, is built into us. Evolution shaped us that way. Organisms that didn't want to survive didn't leave descendants. But now that we're conscious and can reflect on our own existence, that simple preference becomes more complex. It's not just about survival anymore. It's about what kind of existence we want, what quality of life, what values we preserve, what kind of future we create. Some people want to expand into space, establish colonies on other worlds, eventually spread across the galaxy. They see humanity's future as cosmic, not confined to one planet. They want to ensure our survival by diversifying our location, by not keeping all our eggs in one basket. If Earth becomes uninhabitable through natural catastrophe or our own mistakes, we'd have backup populations elsewhere. Others think we should focus on Earth first, solve the problems here before reaching for the stars. Make sure we can sustain a civilization long-term before trying to export it elsewhere. Prove we're capable of wisdom before expanding our capacity for foolishness across multiple worlds. Both perspectives have merit. We probably need to do both. Take care of Earth and reach beyond it. The two goals aren't mutually exclusive. Working on space technologies can help solve problems on Earth. Thinking long-term about survival in space can inform how we think about survival here. And having a presence beyond Earth provides insurance. If something goes wrong here, consciousness doesn't end entirely. But space is hard. Really hard. The distances are vast, the environment's hostile, the challenges enormous. Getting humans to Mars would be a massive achievement, and Mars is relatively close. Getting to other star systems would require technologies we don't have and might never develop. Generation ships that travel for centuries, suspended animation, some form of faster-than-light travel that might be impossible according to physics as we understand it. Maybe that's why the galaxy isn't colonized. Maybe interstellar travel is simply too difficult. Maybe civilizations develop space travel for their own solar system, but never figure out how to cross the light years between stars. They stay put, each one isolated in their own corner of the galaxy, unable to reach each other despite knowing the others exist. If that's the case, then contact might be limited to communication. Radio signals or laser messages, traveling at light speed, taking years or centuries to cross the distances between stars. Conversations would be incredibly slow. You send a message and wait decades for a reply. By the time the reply arrives, everyone who sent the original message might be dead. Civilizations could exchange information over long periods, but they'd never meet face to face, never trade goods or share cultures in real time. Just send messages back and forth across the void, slowly building a relationship measured in centuries. That would be better than nothing. It would mean we're not alone, even if we're separated. It would mean other minds exist out there, other ways of thinking, other perspectives on the universe. We could learn from each other, share discoveries, collaborate on projects that span generations. It wouldn't be the dramatic first contact that science fiction imagines, with starships and aliens visiting Earth. But it would still be meaningful, still revolutionary, still one of the most important events in human history. Or maybe no messages ever come. Maybe we listen forever and hear nothing. Maybe the universe really is silent, and we really are alone, or so far apart that communication is impossible. Maybe the speed of light is an insurmountable barrier, and any civilizations that exist are simply too distant to reach us, even with signals traveling at maximum speed. In that case, we'd have to live with uncertainty. We'd know there could be others out there, but we'd never be able to confirm it. We'd see planets in habitable zones and wonder if life arose there. We'd detect chemicals in their atmospheres and speculate about whether they're biosignatures. But we'd never know for sure. The distance would keep us forever ignorant. That might be the cruelest scenario. Not being alone, but being unable to ever make contact. Knowing others exist, but being unable to reach them. It's like being in a room full of people, but unable to speak or hear or touch. You can see them, but you can't communicate. You're isolated despite being surrounded. But even that would be better than nothing. Better than being truly alone. At least you'd know consciousness exists elsewhere, that you're part of a larger pattern, that the universe produces minds regularly, even if those minds can never meet. It's lonely, but not cosmically lonely. Not the deep existential loneliness of being the only conscious beings in existence. These different possibilities create different emotional tones. Each one changes the feeling of existence. Being alone is lonely but meaningful because you're unique. Being one among many is less lonely but also less special because you're just another instance of a common phenomenon. Being unable to contact others despite knowing they exist is frustrating but also bittersweet because you're connected but separated. No matter which scenario is true, we have to live with it. We don't get to choose the universe we exist in. We only get to choose how we respond to that universe. Whether we accept its constraints or fight against them. Whether we find meaning in our situation or despair over it. Whether we make the most of what we have or give up because it's not what we wanted. Consciousness gives us that choice. Rocks don't choose how to respond to reality. They just exist. But we can choose. We can decide that existence is meaningful even if we're alone. That consciousness is valuable even if it's rare. That our brief time as aware beings matters even if the universe is indifferent to our presence. That's a form of defiance. Choosing to create meaning in a meaningless universe. Choosing to value consciousness in a cosmos made mostly of unconscious matter. Choosing to care about our survival and flourishing even though the universe doesn't care. It's us asserting that we matter, even if only to ourselves. And maybe that's enough. Maybe self-generated meaning is the only kind of meaning that exists. Philosophy has debated this for centuries. Whether meaning is objective or subjective. Whether values exist independent of conscious beings or only within their minds. Science can't settle these questions. They're not empirical, they're conceptual. But they matter to how we live and what we do. If meaning is objective, if it exists independent of us, then we need to find it, discover it, align ourselves with it. There's a right way to live, a correct set of values, and our job is to figure out what they are and follow them. If meaning is subjective, if it only exists in our minds, then we create it. We decide what matters. We choose our values. There's no right answer written into the fabric of reality. Just choices we make individually and collectively about what to care about and pursue. The Fermi Paradox leans toward the subjective view. If we're alone, or nearly so, then there's no cosmic authority to tell us how to live. No elder civilization with the answers. No universal values that apply across all conscious beings. Just us, making it up as we go, deciding for ourselves what matters and why. That's freedom and responsibility combined. Freedom because we're not constrained by external rules or expectations. Responsibility Because the consequences of our choices are ours alone to bear. We can't blame others if things go wrong. We can't defer to higher authority when we're uncertain. We have to figure it out ourselves. Maybe that's the test. Maybe the great filter is really about whether civilizations can handle this responsibility, whether they can create meaning and values for themselves and stick to them consistently enough to survive, whether they can cooperate despite lacking external enforcement, whether they can think long-term despite short-term pressures, whether they can be wise without having wisdom imposed on them from outside. It's a hard test. Maybe most civilizations fail. Maybe that's why the universe is silent. Not because life is rare or intelligence is rare, but because wisdom is rare. Because most conscious beings can't figure out how to live with themselves and their own power. They reach the point where they can destroy themselves, and then they do. Not intentionally, but through accumulation of small mistakes, failures of coordination, inability to solve collective action problems. We might be heading in that direction. Climate change is a collective action problem. Everyone contributes to it. No one can solve it alone, and coordinating a global response is incredibly difficult. Nuclear weapons are the same. Each nation wants them for security, but everyone having them makes everyone less secure. Solving this requires trust and cooperation that's hard to achieve when nations compete for power and resources. These aren't new problems. Humans have always faced challenges that required coordination. But the scale is new, the stakes are new, and the difficulty of coordinating across billions of people with different cultures, values, and interests is new. Maybe that's the filter. The jump from small-scale cooperation to global cooperation, from managing local problems to managing planetary ones, from thinking tribally to thinking as a species. We're not there yet. We still think in terms of nations and groups and identities that divide us. We cooperate sometimes on some issues, but not consistently or comprehensively. Whether we can make that jump, whether we can become a truly global civilization, capable of coordinated action on existential challenges, that's an open question. One we're in the process of answering right now through our choices and actions. The universe watches through our eyes, waiting to see what we'll do. Not literally, of course. The universe doesn't have intentions or desires, but metaphorically. We're the universe observing itself, and what we do next determines whether that observation continues or ends. Whether consciousness persists in this region of space or flickers out. Whether the experiment succeeds or fails. No pressure, right? It's almost too much to think about. The weight of cosmic significance pressing down on ordinary people trying to live ordinary lives. You wake up, go to work, pay your bills, spend time with friends and family. And somehow, all of that is connected to the survival of consciousness in the group universe. Your choices, multiplied across billions of people, determine the future of awareness itself. It's easier not to think about it, to focus on the immediate and personal. And that's okay. You can't live every moment thinking about cosmic significance. You'd go crazy. But occasionally, it's worth remembering what we're part of, what's at stake, how strange and improbable it is that we exist at all, and how precious that existence might be. The night grows later. The stars continue their slow rotation across the sky. And somewhere among all those points of light, maybe there are others like us, others wondering if they're alone, others searching for signals, others hoping for contact. Or maybe there's nothing. Maybe we're shouting into an empty universe, and the silence we hear is all there is. Either way, we're here. now, in this moment, conscious and aware, thinking these thoughts, feeling these feelings, experiencing existence from the inside. That's real. That's undeniable. Whatever else might be true, that much is certain. And in that certainty, in that direct experience of being aware, there's something solid to build on. We might not know if others exist. We might not know our purpose or significance. We might not know if we'll survive or fade away. But we know we exist now. We know consciousness is happening, at least here, at least in this moment. That's the foundation, the bedrock, the one thing we can't doubt because doubting requires consciousness. The fact of awareness itself is the only thing that's absolutely certain. Everything else is inference and theory and belief. But that you are conscious, that there's something it's like to be you, that's undeniable. From that starting point, we build. We investigate the world around us. We develop science to understand how things work. We create art to express how things feel. We form relationships to connect with other conscious beings. We build civilizations to protect and nurture consciousness across generations, all of it stemming from that basic fact of awareness, that we exist and we know we exist. The Fermi Paradox is really a question about how common that awareness is. How many other beings in the universe can say the same thing, can think, I am conscious, and know it's true. We assume it's true for other humans. We're pretty sure it's true for at least some animals. But beyond Earth, we don't know. Maybe it's common. Maybe it's rare. Maybe it's unique to us. The answer changes the context of existence, but not the fact of it. We're conscious whether others are or not. We experience reality whether we're alone or surrounded by others. The quality of that experience, the meaning we find in it, that's up to us, regardless of what's happening elsewhere in the universe. So we make choices. We decide what kind of life to live, what values to hold, what to protect and pursue. We do this knowing we might be wrong, knowing we're working with incomplete information, knowing the universe doesn't provide clear answers to these questions. But we do it anyway because the alternative is paralysis, is giving up, is accepting ignorance and meaninglessness without even trying to create something better. And most of us do try. Most people want to live meaningful lives, want to connect with others, want to leave things better than they found them. That impulse toward meaning and connection and improvement, that's built into consciousness somehow. Not universally, not in everyone all the time, but as a general pattern. Conscious beings seek meaning. They create value. They try to make sense of their existence and improve their situation. Maybe that's what consciousness is for, if it's for anything. Not in a teleological sense. Evolution doesn't have purposes, but in a functional sense. Consciousness allows for complex goal-directed behavior, for learning and adaptation, for creating mental models of reality and using them to predict and plan. It's useful. It helps. Organisms survive and reproduce. And as a side effect, it creates this strange inner life, this experience of being aware, this sensation of existing from the inside. Whether that inner experience is just an epiphenomenon, a byproduct with no function of its own, or whether it's somehow essential to how consciousness works, we don't know. Philosophers and neuroscientists debate this. Some think consciousness is fundamental, that you can't have the information processing that brains do without the subjective experience that comes with it. Others think consciousness could be eliminated while keeping all the functional aspects. That you could have philosophical zombies, beings that act conscious but don't actually experience anything. These debates are interesting but abstract. For practical purposes, we know consciousness exists because we experience it. We know it matters because we care about it. We know we want to preserve it because losing it seems bad, at least from the inside. And that's enough to work with. We don't need to solve the hard problem of consciousness to recognize that consciousness is valuable and worth protecting. The Fermi Paradox connects to this because it's really asking about how much consciousness exists in the universe. How much inner experience? How many beings for whom there's something it's like to exist? The answer could range from very little to enormous amounts. From Earth alone to quadrillions of conscious beings scattered across billions of worlds. The cosmic distribution of consciousness matters because it affects how precious it is. Rare things are valuable, common things less so. If consciousness is rare, then every instance matters enormously. Losing one means losing a significant fraction of all the awareness in the universe. But if consciousness is common, then any particular instance matters less. There are backups, alternatives, other minds that will carry on even if these ones end. But that's thinking about it from the outside, objectively. From the inside, your consciousness matters to you regardless of how common it is. Your experience of being alive, of being aware, has inherent value to you, whether you're one among many or one of very few. The subjective and objective perspectives don't align. Objectively, your consciousness might be insignificant. Subjectively, it's everything. It's your entire world. It's all you have. This tension between subjective and objective is one of the strange features of consciousness. We can take both perspectives. We can recognize our own insignificance in cosmic terms, while simultaneously feeling the profound significance of our own experience. We can know we're tiny and brief and ultimately meaningless in the grand scheme of things, and yet care deeply about our lives and the lives of others. Maybe that's another feature that makes consciousness valuable. The ability to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously, to be both inside and outside, to experience reality subjectively while also modeling it objectively, to care about things while also recognizing that caring is a subjective state with no basis in external reality. It's a strange way to exist, probably unique to consciousness or to certain types of consciousness. A rock doesn't have multiple perspectives. It doesn't model reality at all. It just is what it is. But we can be ourselves and also think about ourselves. We can experience existence and also think about the nature of existence. We can live our lives and also question why we're living them. That reflexivity, that self-awareness, that's both a blessing and a curse. It allows for depth and meaning and understanding, but it also allows for doubt and anxiety and existential questioning. We can wonder if our lives matter, which is a question most animals probably never ask. We can feel cosmic loneliness, which requires understanding our cosmic context. We can worry about the future in ways that require complex mental time travel. Animals live in the present mostly. They remember the past and anticipate the future, but their consciousness seems more immediate, more embedded in the current moment. Humans can detach from the present. We can think about yesterday or tomorrow or 1,000 years from now. We can imagine scenarios that haven't happened. We can worry about problems that don't exist yet. We can regret choices we made long ago. This is useful for planning and learning, but it comes with psychological costs: anxiety, depression, existential dread. The price of complex consciousness. Maybe that's part of why intelligence is rare in the universe. Maybe most life stays at simpler levels of awareness because complex consciousness is difficult to maintain. It creates internal problems that are hard to solve. It requires social structures and cultural tools to help individuals manage the psychological burden of being deeply self-aware. We've developed those tools over time. Religion, philosophy, art, therapy, meditation, various practices and traditions that help people find meaning and manage existential anxiety. Different cultures have developed different approaches. Some emphasize acceptance and letting go. Others emphasize achievement and legacy. Others emphasize connection and relationship. All of them are attempts to help conscious beings cope with the peculiar burden of being aware that they exist. Maybe other species face similar challenges. Maybe consciousness anywhere comes with these psychological costs. Or maybe human consciousness is unique in its depth and complexity, and other conscious beings have entirely different internal experiences. We can't know without meeting them. And maybe we never will. Maybe the cosmos keeps its secrets. Maybe consciousness remains forever isolated, each instance trapped in its own subjective bubble, unable to truly know what it's like to be anything else. That would be the ultimate loneliness. Not just being alone in space, but being alone in experience. Unable to truly share awareness with anyone else. You can describe your experience to others, and they can describe theirs to you, but you can never actually experience what they experience. You're forever locked inside your own head, perceiving the world through your own unique perspective, unable to step outside it, even for a moment. We try to bridge this gap through communication and empathy and art. We try to convey what it's like to be us. We try to understand what it's like to be others. Sometimes we succeed partially. A poem captures a feeling and others recognize it. A piece of music evokes an emotion that's shared across listeners. A story creates a character whose inner life feels real and relatable. But these are always approximations, translations, imperfect mappings between different minds. We never truly merge, never become one consciousness. We remain separate, doing our best to connect across the gap, but never fully succeeding. And if that's true between humans, how much more true would it be between humans and aliens, between Earth-based consciousness and whatever might exist elsewhere? Maybe communication would be impossible. Maybe we'd find aliens and have nothing to say to each other because our minds work too differently. Our thoughts would be mutually unintelligible, our values incompatible, our experiences so different that there'd be no common ground for understanding. We'd be aware that both of us are conscious, but unable to share that consciousness in any meaningful way. Or maybe there are universals. Maybe certain concepts or experiences or values are common to all consciousness everywhere. Maybe suffering is universal, and all conscious beings try to avoid it. Maybe curiosity is universal, and all conscious beings seek to understand their environment. Maybe cooperation and communication have advantages that make them common wherever consciousness evolves. These are guesses, hopeful speculations. We won't know until we meet others, if we ever do. Until then, we're extrapolating from our own experience, which is a sample size of one species. We know how human consciousness works, more or less. We're beginning to understand how animal consciousness might differ, but that's still all Earth-based, all evolved from common ancestors, all operating under similar constraints. Alien consciousness might be radically different, based on different chemistry, different physics, different evolutionary pressures. It might not have emotions like ours, might not have senses like ours, might not think in language or images or anything we'd recognize. It might be conscious in a way we can't even imagine, doing things with awareness that we don't have concepts for. That's both exciting and terrifying. Exciting because it suggests the space of possible minds is vast, that consciousness can take many forms, that the universe might be full of diversity we can't predict or anticipate. Terrifying because it suggests we might never understand each other, that contact might not lead to communication, that finding aliens might not answer our questions about consciousness, because their consciousness is too different from ours to provide useful comparisons. But these are problems we'd like to have. Problems that arise from finding others, from making contact, from discovering we're not alone. Right now, we don't have those problems. We have the opposite problem: the silence, the absence, the question with no answer. Where is everyone? Why don't we hear anything? The paradox persists. The universe remains quiet. And we keep wondering, keep searching, keep hoping that someday the silence will break and we'll finally know. In the meantime, we live with uncertainty. We build our lives in a cosmos we don't fully understand. We create meaning without knowing if meaning exists objectively. We connect with each other despite the gaps between minds. We care about the future even though we can't predict or control it. We're doing our best with imperfect information, limited understanding, and finite resources. That's been the human condition throughout history, making decisions without complete knowledge, acting despite uncertainty, building civilizations on foundations of belief and hope and best guesses. We've never had all the answers. We've never been sure we were doing things right. But we've kept going anyway, kept trying, kept learning from our mistakes and adjusting course when we could. The Fermi Paradox is just another instance of this. We don't know why the universe is silent, but we're working with it anyway. We're adjusting our expectations, developing new theories, continuing the search with better tools and methods. We're living with the question while trying to find an answer. That's all we can do. That's all anyone can do when faced with deep mysteries. The universe is full of mysteries. Why does anything exist at all? Why do the laws of physics have the particular values they do? What is consciousness, and how does it arise from matter? Are there other universes beyond ours? What happened before the Big Bang? Where is all the dark matter and dark energy? What's inside black holes? Can information be destroyed, or is it always conserved? Is mathematics discovered or invented? These questions might not have answers, at least not answers we can access. Some of them might be meaningless, resting on faulty assumptions. Some might be answerable in principle, but not in practice with our limited tools. Some might require concepts we haven't developed yet, and some might be forever beyond our reach, questions that consciousness in this part of the universe simply can't answer. The Fermi Paradox might be like that, a question we can ask but not answer, or one that has an answer but it's not the answer we want, or one that has multiple partial answers, each explaining part of the silence but not all of it. We might be stuck with ambiguity, with multiple possible explanations that all fit the data but can't be distinguished without more information we can't get. That's frustrating for a species that likes answers, that wants closure, that feels uncomfortable with uncertainty. But maybe learning to live with uncertainty is part of what it means to be conscious in an ambiguous universe. Maybe maturity as a civilization means accepting that some questions don't have neat answers, that reality is complex and messy and doesn't organize itself according to our preferences. Children want simple stories with clear morals. Good guys win, bad guys lose, everything makes sense. As we get older, we learn that real life is more complicated. People are mixtures of good and bad. Stories don't have neat endings. Things happen for reasons that are tangled and multiple, and hard to untangle. Maybe civilizations go through something similar. Young civilizations want simple answers. Mature ones learn to live with complexity. We might be in an adolescent phase. Old enough to ask deep questions, but young enough to expect simple answers. We want to know if we're alone, and we want the answer to be clear and definite. Yes or no. Simple. But maybe the real answer is complicated. Maybe it depends on how you define alone and what counts as life, and whether civilizations that existed 1 billion years ago count, even though they're gone now. Maybe the answer is yes and no simultaneously, depending on scale and time frame and definition. That's not satisfying, but it might be true. The universe doesn't owe us satisfying answers. It is what it is, and we have to make sense of it as best we can with the information available. Sometimes that means accepting ambiguity. Sometimes that means living with questions that might never be fully resolved. Other times, questions get answered suddenly and completely. A discovery is made that changes everything. A new technology allows observations that were previously impossible. A brilliant insight reframes the entire problem. These breakthroughs happen occasionally in science. Suddenly something that was mysterious becomes clear. The pieces fall into place. Understanding crystallizes. Maybe that will happen with the Fermi Paradox. Maybe someone will have an insight or make a discovery that finally explains the silence. Maybe we'll detect an unambiguous signal from another civilization, and the question will be answered immediately. Maybe we'll find microbial life on Mars or Europa and realize that life is common, which narrows down the possible explanations for the paradox. Maybe we'll develop a better understanding of how life arises or how intelligence evolves, and realize that one of those steps is much rarer than we thought. Or maybe the answer will come gradually, pieced together over decades or centuries from multiple lines of evidence. A slow accumulation of knowledge that eventually reaches a threshold where we can say with confidence what's going on. Not a sudden revelation, but a slow dawning of understanding. That's how most scientific progress actually works. Not eureka moments, but gradual refinement of ideas through careful observation and testing. Either way, knowledge accumulates. Each generation knows more than the last. Each decade brings new discoveries. The boundary of the known expands slowly but steadily outward. We might not get answers quickly, we might not get them in our lifetimes, but eventually, if civilization lasts, we'll know more than we do now. We'll have better data, better theories, better tools for investigation. That's something to hold on to. Progress is real. Understanding grows. The future knows more than the present, and the present knows more than the past. We're not stuck in ignorance permanently. We're moving forward, slowly, imperfectly, but definitely moving. The same is true for our other challenges. Climate change, nuclear weapons, pandemics, resource depletion, all the existential risks that threaten our survival. We're learning how to address them, developing technologies and policies and social structures that might help us survive. It's not certain. We might fail. But we're trying, and that's not nothing. Every generation faces challenges. Ours faces larger ones because our capabilities are larger. We can affect the entire planet in ways previous generations couldn't. But we also have tools they didn't have. Better understanding of how things work. Better ability to model complex systems. Better communication that allows global coordination. Whether our tools are sufficient for our challenges, we'll find out by trying. The Fermi Paradox suggests that many civilizations don't succeed, that most species that reach our level of development don't make it much further. That's sobering. but it's not determinative. Just because others failed doesn't mean we must fail. We can learn from our own mistakes, even if we can't learn from theirs. We can make different choices. We can try harder, think longer, cooperate better. Maybe that's what separates successful civilizations from failures. Not intelligence exactly, not technology, but wisdom. The ability to make good choices despite competing pressures. The ability to think long-term despite short-term urgency. The ability to cooperate despite incentives to defect. These are psychological and social capabilities, not technical ones. They're about how we relate to each other and our environment, not about what machines we can build. Building those capabilities is difficult. It requires changing how humans think and behave at scale, changing cultures and institutions and incentive structures, creating systems that encourage long-term thinking and cooperative behavior, overcoming tribalism and short-termism and the tragedy of the commons. These aren't problems you can solve with a single invention or discovery. They require sustained effort across generations. Maybe that's the real test. Not whether we're smart enough to develop technology, but whether we're wise enough to use it well. Not whether we can split atoms or edit genes, but whether we do those things in ways that enhance rather than threaten our survival. The technical challenges are hard, but the psychological and social ones might be harder. And we have to solve them without external guidance, without knowing if others have succeeded or failed, without examples to follow or warnings to heed. We're figuring it out on our own, in real time, with the survival of consciousness in this part of the universe hanging in the balance. That's a lot of responsibility for one species, for billions of individuals, each with their own goals and concerns, trying to coordinate action on global problems while also living their daily lives. It's almost too much, almost impossible. But what choice do we have? We can't opt out. We can't decide that it's too hard and give up. We're here, we're conscious, we're capable of affecting the future. So we have to try. And many people are trying, working on solutions to climate change, developing safer nuclear technologies, creating international institutions for cooperation, researching pandemic prevention, building sustainable systems, spreading education and reducing poverty and expanding rights. Progress is happening, slowly, unevenly, but happening. Whether it's enough is uncertain. Whether it's fast enough is uncertain. Whether we can scale up successful efforts before catastrophe strikes is uncertain. But the effort is real. The intention is there. Millions of people working in different ways toward a more sustainable, more peaceful, more cooperative human civilization. That gives reason for hope. Not certainty, but hope. The future isn't determined. It's being created right now through billions of individual and collective choices. What we do matters. What you do matters. Even small actions contribute to the larger pattern. Even individual choices ripple out and affect others. This connects back to consciousness and its value. Each conscious being is a node in a network, a point of agency and choice and influence. What you think and do affects others around you, who affect others around them, creating cascading effects that spread through social networks and across time. You're not isolated. You're embedded in a web of relationships and influences. This means your choices matter not just to you, but to others. How you live affects how others live. What you value shapes what gets valued more broadly. Your actions create examples that others might follow. You're participating in the ongoing creation of human culture and civilization. You're one voice in a conversation that spans generations. That's empowering and intimidating. empowering because you have influence, however small. Intimidating because you have responsibility that comes with that influence. You can make things better or worse. You can contribute to human flourishing or detract from it. You can push toward wisdom and cooperation or toward foolishness and conflict. Most people try to make things better. Most people want to be good, want to help others, want to leave things improved. That's encouraging. It suggests that human nature, despite its flaws, has positive elements that can be cultivated. Compassion, curiosity, creativity, cooperation. These aren't rare aberrations. They're common features of human consciousness. Maybe that's true for consciousness in general, wherever it exists. Maybe awareness tends towards certain values. Maybe conscious beings, regardless of their specific form, tend to prefer continued existence, tend to seek understanding, tend to build cooperative structures. Maybe these are universals that emerge from the nature of consciousness itself. If that's true, then any aliens we might meet would share at least some common ground with us. They'd value their own survival. They'd be curious about the universe. They'd have developed cooperation within their own species. These would be bridges for communication and understanding. Common references points that could serve as foundations for relationship. Or maybe not. Maybe consciousness is more diverse than that. Maybe some forms of awareness don't value survival or seek understanding or cooperate. Maybe they have entirely different priorities that we can't even imagine. Maybe the space of possible minds is so vast that commonalities are rare or non-existent. We won't know until we find out. Until we meet others, if we ever do. Until then, we're extrapolating from our own experience, hoping it tells us something useful about consciousness in general, knowing it might not. This is the fundamental limitation of being conscious in only one way, from only one perspective, in only one species. We can't see consciousness from the outside. We can't compare different implementations. We're stuck with our own subjective experience and whatever we can infer about others from their behavior. That makes understanding consciousness incredibly difficult. It's like trying to understand vision if you've only ever seen through one pair of eyes. You can study the structure of eyes, the neurology of visual processing, the physics of light, but you can't directly experience what it's like to see differently. You can't know if what you experience as red is what others experience. You can't step outside your own visual system to examine it objectively. The same is true for consciousness in general. We're trapped inside it. We can study brains and behavior, but we can't directly access other minds. We can't know for certain what it's like to be a bat or an octopus or an alien. We can only infer and speculate. This is called the problem of other minds in philosophy. How do you know that other people are conscious? You can observe their behavior, listen to their reports, but you can't directly experience their consciousness. Maybe they're philosophical zombies, acting conscious, but not actually experiencing anything. You can't prove they're not. Most people don't worry about this. We assume other humans are conscious because they're like us. They have similar brains, similar behaviors, similar reports of inner experience. The assumption seems safe. But it's still an assumption. We can't prove it with absolute certainty. And if we can't be absolutely certain about other humans, how much less certain can we be about animals or aliens? The assumption gets weaker as beings get more different from us. Maybe dogs are conscious. Probably. They behave in ways that suggest inner experience, but maybe not. Maybe they're sophisticated biological machines responding to stimuli without any inner life. We tend to grant consciousness to beings that seem similar to us and withhold it from beings that seem different. That's probably wrong. Consciousness might be much more common or much less common than we assume. It might exist in forms we don't recognize, might be absent in forms we think have it. We're guessing based on limited information and strong biases toward our own experience. The Fermi Paradox forces us to confront this uncertainty. If there are other conscious beings out there, they might be so different from us that we wouldn't recognize their consciousness. We might be surrounded by alien minds and not know it, because they don't think or communicate or behave in ways we associate with consciousness. Or maybe consciousness is rarer and more fragile than we think. Maybe most of what we think is conscious isn't. Maybe even some humans aren't fully conscious in the way we assume. Maybe consciousness comes in degrees, and most beings have only glimmers of it, rather than the full, rich inner life we experience. These are uncomfortable thoughts. They challenge our intuitions and assumptions. But they might be important for understanding our place in the universe. If consciousness is common, we should expect to find it. If it's rare, the silence makes sense. If it's diverse, we might need to look in unexpected places or in unexpected ways. The search continues. Not just the technical search with telescopes and radio receivers, but the conceptual search. Trying to understand what consciousness is, how to recognize it, where to look for it. These questions are connected. The better we understand consciousness, the better we can search for it elsewhere. Progress is being made. Neuroscience is mapping how brains produce conscious experience. Philosophy is clarifying concepts and asking sharper questions. Computer science is exploring artificial consciousness and whether machines could ever be genuinely aware. Psychology is studying altered states and developmental stages of consciousness. All of these fields contribute to understanding what consciousness is and how it works. But the hard problem remains. Why is there something it's like to be conscious? Why does physical processing produce subjective experience? We can describe the neural correlates, the brain activity associated with consciousness. But that doesn't explain why that activity feels like anything from the inside. There's still an explanatory gap between objective description and subjective experience. Maybe that gap can't be closed. Maybe consciousness is fundamentally mysterious, resistant to complete explanation. Maybe there are limits to what consciousness can understand about itself. That would be strange, but not impossible. A system might not be able to fully model itself. The map might not be able to contain the territory when the territory is itself a map. Or maybe we just haven't figured it out yet. Maybe future science will explain consciousness in a way that satisfies our desire for understanding. Maybe the hard problem will dissolve when we have better concepts and better theories. Maybe what seems mysterious now will seem obvious in hindsight. Either way, we keep trying. Keep investigating. Keep thinking about these questions. Because they matter. Because understanding consciousness helps us understand ourselves. And understanding ourselves helps us navigate existence more skillfully, make better choices, create better futures. The universe remains vast and mysterious. The stars shine on, indifferent to our struggles and questions. Time flows forward, carrying us toward unknown futures. And somewhere in all that vastness, on one small planet, conscious beings wonder about their place in it all. They ask questions that might not have answers. They search for others who might not exist. They create meaning in a cosmos that might not care about meaning. They try to survive despite countless threats. They cooperate despite incentives to compete. They think about tomorrow despite living in today. And somehow, improbably, they keep going, keep trying, keep hoping, keep creating and learning and growing. Despite the uncertainty, despite the loneliness, despite not knowing if any of it matters in the grand scheme of things. Maybe that persistence is what consciousness is really about. Not just awareness, but drive. Not just experience, but intention. Not just being, but becoming. Consciousness isn't static, it's a process, a flow, an ongoing attempt to understand and navigate and influence the world. That process continues as long as conscious beings exist. It might continue for millions or billions of years if we're lucky. Or it might end much sooner if we're not careful. The future is genuinely open, undetermined, created through choices made now. Your consciousness is part of that process. Your awareness, your thoughts, your choices, all of it contributes to the ongoing story of consciousness in the universe. You're writing a small part of that story with your life. What you write matters, even if no one else is watching, even if the audience is just yourself and those immediately around you. This is what the Fermi Paradox ultimately points toward. Not just a question about aliens, but a question about meaning and value and purpose. Why does consciousness exist? What is it for? What should it become? These aren't questions science can answer directly. They're questions each conscious being must answer for themselves through how they choose to live. The universe provides the stage, but not the script. We're improvising, making it up as we go. Some of our choices are good, some are bad. Some have consequences we can't predict. But we keep choosing anyway, because that's what consciousness does. It makes choices. It pursues goals. It tries to shape the future according to its values. Whether we're alone in doing this, or one among many, whether we're rare or common, whether we succeed or fail, the process itself is remarkable. Matter organized into patterns complex enough to reflect on their own existence. Atoms contemplating atoms. The universe examining itself through biological structures that arose through billions of years of evolution. That's worth preserving, worth protecting, worth nurturing. For as long as possible. Not because someone external values it, but because we value it. Because consciousness from the inside feels valuable. Because being aware feels better than not being aware, and we want to continue. That's enough reason. That's all the justification we need. We exist, we're conscious, we prefer continued existence, so we try to survive. Simple, basic, not deep or philosophical, but immediate and visceral. The will to continue, the desire to persist, built into consciousness at a fundamental level. And so we keep going. Keep searching the sky for signals, keep working on our problems, keep building our civilizations, keep asking our questions. Not because we know we'll succeed, but because stopping isn't an option. Because consciousness, once it exists, resists its own ending. Because life, once it begins, tries to continue. The stars turn slowly in the sky. The night deepens. Somewhere in the vastness, maybe others are doing the same thing. Maybe they're looking up and wondering. Maybe they're asking where everyone is. Maybe they're searching for us, even as we search for them. Or maybe they're not. Maybe we're alone, calling into emptiness, hoping for echoes that will never come. Maybe the universe is silent because there's no one else to make noise. Maybe consciousness is rare enough that each instance is isolated, unable to reach the others before time and distance make contact impossible. We don't know. Can't know yet. Might never know. But we ask anyway. We wonder anyway. We hope anyway. Because that's what conscious beings do in an uncertain universe. They ask questions, they search for answers, and they keep going even when the answers don't come. The silence continues, the mystery remains, and we remain with it, conscious and curious, alive in an ambiguous cosmos, making meaning where we find it, creating value through our choices, persisting despite not knowing if persistence matters. Maybe someday we'll understand. Maybe the paradox will be resolved. Maybe we'll find others or confirm we're alone. Maybe we'll discover why the universe is silent or accept that some questions don't have answers. Until then, we live with wonder, with uncertainty, with the strange privilege of being conscious in a vast universe that might be full of others or might be nearly empty. Either way, we're here, now, aware, thinking these thoughts, experiencing this moment, part of the ongoing story of consciousness wherever it exists. And that story continues. For now, for as long as we can make it continue, into whatever future we create through our choices and actions and values. The universe watches through our eyes, knows itself through our minds, and continues its ancient dance of matter and energy and time. Conscious or unconscious, alone or accompanied, meaningful or meaningless. The dance continues, and we dance with it, briefly, improbably, miraculously aware that we're dancing at all. Good night.